So I just made a video the other day, and it was about the disconnect that a lot of people have between, fitness and recovery, and they think it's disconnected. A lot of people think one has nothing to do with the other, and this couldn't be far further from the truth, because it's all closely interlinked. As I always preach, if you forget one pillar, you'll have a hard time staying sober, and it's just the way it is, right? So you got to keep your house clean. You got to keep those veins and arteries clean. You got to keep those organs clean. And especially with alcohol, when you drink over so many years, right, there's like so much fat that accumulates across the organs. And not even saying that like the liver is completely fucked, but that's just a different thing altogether, right? Because cirrhosis is a real thing, and especially when detoxing, when you're a heavy drinker, can get interesting, right? So yeah, that disconnect that a lot of people have with fitness and recovery is just baffling to me, right? And that the same thing goes for a lot of these therapists out there and doctors out there and psychotherapists, that kind of treat the addiction as a mental health problem only, right? And it's just not, in a lot of cases it's not, to a high percentage, I would say. And as I always preach, it's a spiritual void that is present, and until you fill that void, you will always relapse. It's just the way it is. Like, just spoke to someone today as well, and it clearly always points to that. It's always that spiritual void. And it's that aha moment that a lot of people have, when I start talking to them or when I start working with them. It's like, man, like I never looked at it from this perspective. I've tried everything. It's just the way it is. Like, the regular Western medicine approaches, they just don't work for a lot of people. If your addiction is rooted in something like more deep than a little trauma that you had a couple months ago, then you'll just need to work on it in a deeper way. It needs more depth, it needs more width, the way you approach this. And this is only achievable through, the skill, and the skill that, someone that has walked the walk can have, right? Like, if you, do this with someone that has only learned from the book, you will get the approach that is in the book. And I tried that. It didn't work for me. I know it didn't work for a lot of other people, because that's, the people that come to me often. And so, yeah, it's up to you, Do you want to try something out that has a high probability of failing? And in many cases, you don't even know, because there's some betterment and some improvements in the first weeks or months, and then the relapse happens, right? And then that whole data that they post and that they show is only focused on that first phase where it's going well. But yeah, sadly it's not, and sadly there's a lot of shit out there, and sadly there's a lot of people out there that are not studying, not continuously improving their knowledge and not continuously learning, and they think, once they got the degree or once they got that certificate that they're good, and that's just this doesn't work like that. If you're a teacher, if you're someone that works with humans, if you're of service, then study has no end. Like, you always have a teacher. You can always learn from someone. I learn from every client, for example, right? I learn from every teacher that I kind of came across, even if we parted ways pretty soon, in the sense, if it didn't work out, I could still learn something from them. There's always something to learn from anyone, because we just don't know everything. So, yeah, have a think about this and let me know what you think about that. And hit me out in the comments. Just let's converse a bit about these topics. I think there's not enough conversation about these topics. And so, DM me on Instagram if you want.